I'm sitting in a room with 30 other professionals, my first year working full-time in higher education. During our introductions, we each share one thing that we've come to talk about, and it doesn't take long for a theme to emerge, something that's brought up by person after person as a struggle that weighs heavier than all others. This one thing keeps many from being fully successful, and for some, causes them to reconsider whether higher education is even right for them at all. Before we know it, our time together is up, and we've barely finished our introductions. The common theme? Supervision. When I think about the major challenges that my student affairs colleagues face on a day-to-day basis, managing difficult supervisors is near the top of the list, right up there with too many meetings and that student who still hasn't answered your email. Now, conflict is a natural, dare I say healthy, part of supervisory relationships, but the conflicts that my colleagues experience truly take a toll on them, emotionally, physically, even spiritually. It's no surprise then that research says that we tend to supervise the way we want to be supervised. One study found that supervisors had a propensity to tailor their styles not to the needs of their individual team members, but instead to their own personal histories and needs. Research also says that we tend to overestimate our effectiveness as supervisors. Another study found that supervisors rated themselves more highly on almost every aspect of their supervisory practice as compared with their supervisees. And the consequences of these realities go beyond interpersonal disagreements. One of the principal factors of attrition for new student affairs professionals is their perceived quality of supervision. Unsurprisingly, job satisfaction is also linked to perceived quality of supervision. Beyond this, a 2010 study found that supervisees actually felt less competent as professionals when they rated their supervision quality as low. And finally, a 2013 study found that only 1 in 8 student affairs professionals consults their supervisor during difficult times on the job. So let me recap. Why should we care about this? Well, we have professionals who are leaving the field due to ineffective supervision who could be the leaders and innovators that we need to keep our profession current. We have team members who could be incredible performers if they were supervised in the way they needed. And we're missing out on critical learning moments with our supervisees when we could be a part of developing their competence and their confidence. It's evident to me that there's still a lot of work to be done for all of us who care about the success of our supervisees. Today, I'm honored to lead my own team of incredible professionals, and it's been through those experiences, both as a supervisor and as a supervisee, that have led me to ask this question. What would it look like to incorporate the principles of social justice and inclusion that we use with our students daily into the ways that we interact with one another? From the time that I was an undergraduate working in student life to my work today, I've experienced firsthand what intentional social justice-centric supervision feels like, or perhaps more frequently, what it doesn't feel like. In fact, you all have probably also experienced both these ends of the spectrum as well, even if you weren't aware of it at the time, or perhaps just chalked it up to personality clashes. Did you come away from that interaction with your supervisor feeling empowered to do your work? Or did you feel like your voice was not heard or respected? Too often, this is the day-to-day reality in which we do our work, and it takes a very real toll. But what if, when leading our teams, we took a different approach? What if we envisioned a supervisory practice that was centered on the needs of our individual team members rather than on our own? What if our team members felt empowered, seen, heard, and validated after engaging with us, regardless of if that exchange incorporated positive feedback or constructive criticism? What if, because of their experiences with their supervisor, our team members were more confident, competent, successful, and satisfied in their work? The world of counselors and therapists in training calls this feminist supervision. There's a long and rich history within feminist movements of disrupting patriarchal power structures and finding new and better ways to relate to one another. But before I go any further, I need to clarify what I mean when I say feminist. I cannot get behind a feminism that does not center women of color, transgender women, queer women, Muslim women, women with disabilities, and so many of the other ways that our identities intricately connect. When I say feminist supervision, I mean a supervisory framework that is truly intersectional and fully committed to social justice. So, what does this framework actually look like? Feminist praxis and supervision has 5 core tenets. First, feminist supervision is characterized by collaborative relationships. A collaborative relationship is one in which there's a recognition of the overlap between the roles of teacher and learner. A collaborative relationship, however, is not an egalitarian relationship. In fact, it does a disservice to our supervisees to portray a supervisory relationship as egalitarian because it denies power where it exists. Instead, collaborative relationships are mutually respectful, encouraging of diverse perspectives, and validating of the autonomy of all parties. When I was in my first professional role, I came in with an expectation that my supervisor would know everything there is to know about diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Instead, to my surprise, she asked me my opinion more than she gave me hers, and more than that, genuinely listened, both serving as a teacher and at times as a learner as we engaged in our work together. Though this stretched me immensely at the time, looking back, I am so appreciative of the ways that she forced me to be autonomous, to discover the answers for myself, and most importantly, to make mistakes. Secondly, feminist supervision incorporates an awareness and examination of social context. This tenet can also be known as supervision is not colorblind. In other words, our identities of race, class, gender, sex, sexuality, ability, and many others, along with our complex experiences of oppression and privilege, inherently impact all aspects of our lives, including supervisory relationships, and must be acknowledged and attended to in the supervision process. My journey in higher education once brought me to a team where I was the only white person as well as the only queer person. My supervisor, a heterosexual woman of color, both supported me as I navigated a workplace that often discounted my sexuality as illegitimate, while also challenging me to be mindful of the ways that my whiteness took up space in interactions with my colleagues and with her, lessons I'm still reflecting on to this day. Next, feminist supervision is predicated upon an examination of power dynamics. It is critical that we as supervisors both acknowledge our power and use it appropriately by having upfront and honest conversations about the supervisor-supervisee relationship early on with our team in the supervision process, as well as throughout the year. This tenet also necessitates leveraging the position of power that we have in a way that benefits our supervisees. The hierarchical structure of our institutions can sometimes be overpowering, and yet I strive to both name and subvert this with my team however I can. Subtle actions like putting their name first on presentations, asking if there's anything I can take on their behalf to meetings with senior administrators, and asking for feedback on my own performance as often as I give them feedback on theirs are all a part of this process, which is ongoing and continuous. This framework also incorporates intentional reflexivity in our daily practice. Just as we know that our students learn through reflection and meaning making, being an effective supervisor requires that continuous self-examination and commitment to lifelong learning. Reflexivity is most impactful when it's combined with authenticity and vulnerability. Being open and honest with our team about our growth edges is both an incredible way to disrupt power dynamics, as well as an opportunity to model a developmental attitude toward our work. In my team's most recent 360 review process, I received feedback that though I encourage them to engage in self-care behaviors frequently, I don't always model this intentionality and balance in my own daily life. Reflecting on this further has been an important reminder for me that I'm not the only one who's impacted when I fail to effectively care for myself. And my openness about this with my team has empowered them to hold me accountable when I fall short of my espoused values. Finally, this framework centers a commitment to advancing social change. In a field like student affairs that is really centered on the principles of social justice, this may seem obvious. However, it is also a supervisor's critical responsibility to advocate on behalf of their supervisees and their team members. It's fitting that Dr. Susan Marine is here and introduced me today because she has been a model for me of what this tenet looks like. Susan taught me the power that research has for leveraging social change. It encourages me in my own scholarly work to this day. But more than that, she also demonstrated how powerful it can be when a supervisor advocates on behalf of a supervisee. When I was a graduate student and struggling with housing insecurity, Susan navigated a process that was complex and bureaucratic by using her position of power in a way I never could have, and I'm so grateful for that. So, these 5 things may seem intriguing, but I know many of you may be wondering, do they actually work? Well, research has found that feminist supervision practices are correlated with lower turnover, higher job satisfaction, and greater confidence, resulting in supervisees' increased ability to be successful in their roles. The active practice of these 5 tenets is also not linked at all to social desirability or length of time as a supervisor. In other words, yes, they do work, and no, they are not the same thing as being a likable person or having an extensive resume. So, to return to my initial question, what would it look like to incorporate the principles of social justice and inclusion that we use with our students daily into the ways that we interact with one another? It would mean that we as supervisors could build meaningful connections with our team in which we could authentically learn as well as teach. It would mean that we could relate to one another in a more compassionate, empathic, and understanding way. And it would mean that we could cultivate and retain talent that could quite literally transform our profession for the better. It's because of this that I'm a firm believer that a commitment to our profession necessitates a commitment to more intentional and social justice-centric supervision. Feminist praxis and supervision is one highly effective model for how to do this. Regardless of where you're at in your own professional journey, I challenge you to join me in a commitment to living out our values, to continuous self-examination, and to ongoing learning and growth. Thank you.